And today we're going to talk about the core web vitals. So it's a really important topic, I think. These are Google's new web performance metrics. And since this June, Google is also penalizing websites who have poor core web vitals. So it's a really relevant topic at this time. And it's important if you want to improve your ranking, but also your conversion rate and your customer experience. So Leroy is going to tell you all about it today. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the Q&A. It's in the tab right below. And we will get back to them at the end of the talk. We are also recording this session, so if you want to rewatch, you can rewatch it anytime or share it with your colleagues or friends. And that's it. So I'm going to give the floor to Leroy. Enjoy.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Well, first things first, who is talking? Nice to get an image of the voice that's doing this one. My name is Leroy Darawa. I'm 35 years of age, happily married to my wife, Wendy, and we have a daughter of 5 years old. That should give you a bit of an image of the one who's talking right now. I'm working as a CTO at Code. Shira just talked about that one. And today, what do we want to share? What we want to make clear is the goal of core web vitals. What are they? How are they measured? And how can you measure your own website? How can you improve those scores and why should you want to? And also a very important topic, what is realistically achievable? Because it's really nice to have a score of 100, as we will see in the next slide. But what can you do with actual content on an actual website? Well, the goal itself of core web vitals, Google has made a system to just give a score to your website, which is resulting in an objective score in the 0 to 100 range regarding the user experience of your website. So basically, Google is trying to put a number on the user experience and user friendliness of your website itself. What it does is it gives insight to any possible improvements you might want to do on both mobile and desktop. And in this case, they both have their own scores because a mobile is quite a limited device. You have a smaller screen, a limited connection, stuff like that. It might be a little bit less faster than both desktop devices. And one of the most important aspects of the Google page ranking, the score that you achieve on the website is used for your ranking in Google search engine. And this is, I think, one of the biggest reasons most people are attending this webinar today. Let's start with the Google definition of the core web vitals. The core web vitals, in essence, are like only 3 points, like loading, interactivity, and visual stability. More on that later on. I will discuss those topics in the next slide. And in lesser degree, you have the mobile friendliness, the safe browsing experience, is it an encrypted connection? More on that technical stuff that will be discussed later on. Let's dive into the first of the core web vitals, loading. What it does is just essentially giving a score to how fast does your website load. How long did it take to render the biggest image or the biggest text? And just to see this in practice, for example, is the website of Instagram. Perhaps this is one of the most well-known websites. In this case, you have 2 parts. The FCP is the first contentful pane. How long does it take to get to see anything on the website? In this case, it is the Instagram logo. But one of the most important aspects, let's scroll back. Now back. What is the biggest, the largest contentful pane? In this case, it's the logo. And this is a score that Google uses to give you a page speed for the website itself. One of the most important parts of the core web vitals. And as we know it from practice, it is really annoying to just enter a website and wait for it to load and load and load and load. So how fast do you actually see anything on the website itself? And how fast does the largest part is rendered? The second important part is the interactivity. How long does it take to let the user interact with the website itself? And as you can see this in practice, let's say you visit a web store and you want to buy something, you want to search for a specific product. How long does it take before you can actually use the search field. Also something quite technical to measure, but Google does quite a good job. You pass this test when it's less than 100 milliseconds. That's 0.1 second, which is really fast. And I will give you a few examples in a few slides just to see what it looks like. And the third part, which is really important as well, visual stability. Perhaps you know this as well from a website. You load a website and you see stuff jumping around. Okay, it's loading. While it's loading, you see a header, an image jumping around, text popping up. Google is establishing a score for this as well, and this should be less than 0.1. And again, I will give you an example of this one. Like this. Let's say you're on a website, you want to order something. You get an order confirmation, you have selected 14 items. This goes really fast, so I will play it twice. What happens is you have selected 40 items. Is this correct? You try to click on no go back, but an app puts some content in between in the meantime, which results in clicking on a different button. Just to see it again. And as you see, I tried to click on no go back, but since the stuff jumped down while loading it, I clicked on submitting my order, accidentally submitting my order. Well, the score that this achieves leads to a few things. It gives a good indication how user-friendly and is the user experience on your website itself. It is taken into account for search results ranking in Google, which means you will end up higher or lower based on the score, because Google has a very good system in place to link the score to the user friendliness and how effective is this website for the user that ends up on the website itself. Also a good thing to know, we often get questions, while I had a good page speed like 3 years ago, what happened? It will be lower in time because of increased possibilities, technical possibilities, faster connections, tighter measurements. So eventually it's a gliding scale towards the future. You might today have a score of, let's say 80. Next year, it might be 60, might be 50. No one knows for sure. And a really important part as well, a higher score increases your conversion significantly. We will give you a few examples of this one. It's good to know we have two types of measurements. We will dive into the lab data after this slide, but we also have field data. And the main difference between this, the lab data can be measured with tools and give you a really good example of what things will look like in practice. And the field data is actual data, as they call it, real user monitoring, also called RUM, and is aggregated from all users that are using Google Chrome worldwide. This gives a really good score on what type of connections do they have in, let's say, another country, any other country, or specific user data. Is it mobile? Is it a lot of desktop devices? And they all have impact on the achieved score. Let's take an example of the page speed insight. This is a tool I will also explain later on. This rates your website on several parts and just combining it all together into one score. And in this case, the score itself is like 44. And as you can see on the lab data stuff, there are red and green colors. And as with, well, let's say anything in light green is okay. Red is a warning sign. This case, 44 is on mobile. This could also result in desktop on a different score. What's also interesting in this case is that the field data for mobile is different. This is the same website, the same score altogether, but we see that the field data that is gathered for this website is really different. And just to compare those, we set them just below each other. And this is also a good case that when you are analyzing your website with the lab data, with the tools that are available, it looks like a lot of improvements are possible, but it could be that you have a lot of content in this case. And there are several technical challenges to just solve this, like let's name one technical term, caching. which means that in result in real life will be way better. This is obviously very theoretical, so time for some practice as well. To summarize the Google scores, Google evaluates your website and creates a score that represents your user experience for the website. The estimation of this one can be done with lab data, with the tools I will name after this slide. But what's more important is the field data. What happens in real life with real scenarios, real users, real user monitoring. Also the theory versus practice part. And the score itself is an integral part, getting more and more important of Google search and affects your search engine ranking. What's also good to note that every year around May, Google is updating their entire searching algorithm. No one knows exactly what they are doing and how they are measuring the website. We only know that it is updated every year around May, and that it also impacts the ratings and the scores you already achieve on your current website. And eventually you want to measure your own website. And there are a few tools to do that. And I will give a few examples. These tools are available. The easiest is to just Google for the tool name. You will end up on the current website explaining how the tool works. And in order of user friendliness, the first one is page speed inside. What this does, well, as you see the URL, then you know why I'm saying just Google the term to get there. This just lets you enter an URL for your own website and gives you a score. I will give you an example of this later on as well to see it in practice. Lighthouse is also a tool we often use. This is best used if you want to manage multiple websites. They all lead to the same scores, the same reports, the same parts of the report. They're just different ways of entering the data and analyzing the data itself. When we look at Calibre, also a very good system to just monitor multiple websites at a time, but also see what happens over time for the website itself. In this case, you have 4 examples for it in docs, blog article, and you can also see what happens over time with the score that is achieved. You see some technical parts as well, like the total blocking time, which is really interesting for developers. But as a website owner, for example, this could be less interesting. You just want to know, do I do things in the correct way? And one of the most in-depth tools you can use, this is mostly for technical people and developers, is the Chrome User Experience Report, also known as CRUX. And the end result looks quite simple. You get a report showing up. A lot of green is good, a lot of red is less good. And this is used basically as one of the reasons to just analyze your website and see where improvements lie, both for mobile and for desktop. Each tool itself, they all lead to several recommendations. This is an example of things you could do and how you can affect them. And as you can see, most of those are quite technical. I will just summarize it later on to see what you can do yourself without any technical challenges needed in there. In this case, some quick wins to easily increase your score. Prevent lots of apps and plugins loading. Because if you have a website you want to use, for example, Google Analytics to see all the data, what's happening? You might want to enable a live chat. You might want to enable a pop-up redirecting foreign customers to a foreign website. But the more and more apps and plugins you are using, the lower your score will be. Also, a very important one and easy to get is only load what is shown initially on the screen itself. So let's assume that your homepage contains a lot of things, like a related collection page, an image banner, anything, and the entire page might get quite long. The longer your page, the more content is on there, but also the less that is directly visible the first time you visit your website. So only what you see on the screen initially try to load that part first. And another one to easily prevent is a jumpy page when scrolling. I will also give a few real life examples after this one just to see what's happening. It's not necessarily bad practice. Well, it is bad practice, but not necessarily bad for users to experience. It could be way faster than the human eye can detect. But basically, you want a very sturdy web page to just load as you would expect it. Oh, well, we have a missing one. And properly sizing images is also quite important, because why would you load in a really big image if it's on a mobile device with just a tiny screen? Lazy loading is a more technical term, which means basically that you just want the entire content to be rendered before, and images might be loaded after. And there is one challenge in here: is when you are loading images as the last part, things might be jumping around. There's also a technical challenge too. How to solve that? Just reserve some space for the image itself. I will also demo this in a few real website cases. What we did, we found a few examples from Shopify, the platform we work on mostly, and just to see what happens on the website. And we want to see a few examples. I will open the link, my browser will open, and we will dive into that one. Allbirds, for example, is, as you can see, a really fast page to load. However, we do have a few improvements. As you can see on this page, the entire homepage is quite long, quite a lot of content, a lot of images in there. Quite long. And in this case, it's really important to just load the first stuff, for example, that you see on the screen, which is this part. If we analyze this website within Google PageSpeed Insight, and this is one of the first tools we mentioned, I can show you how easy this is to use. Just enter the URL, click on Analyze, and it takes a few seconds to analyze the entire website. And what it does in the background is just emulate the user. What if a user loads the website? How long does it take? What happens? And what are the improvements I can take on this website itself? Let's wait for this to be done. This is also one of the main examples why we are using this website, because the page speed itself is quite low, and this looks quite alarming. We do see a lot of improvements that are possible. But also, for example, properly sized images. Because in this case, it seems that the images that are loaded are just too big. And there are a lot of other tips that are quite technical. And in this case, I think this overreaches the target of this webinar. But the main thing I want to just provide to you all is that the score you achieve does not necessarily mean that you have a very bad website. It's always a balance between functionality and the page speed you want to achieve for Google. In this case, for example, they have a live chat. And from practice, we know that a live chat has a big impact on your page speed. So with a live chat, this could be a really big added feature for Allbirds in this case. You really want to make a connection with the client, give them a really low threshold to just contact them right away. But this comes at a cost at page speed level. And so eventually the entire choice is between what do you want? Do you want a really high page speed, or do you want really functional components for clients on your website? Another example of this one is Jigsaw, for example. Let's refresh this page and let's pay really close attention to what happens when you see the page rendered. This looks pretty good because they reserve some space for the image. So you don't see any jumping around on the page itself. This is the home page. And if we click down through to, for example, a collection page, let's say collection page like this. What really stands out right now is that you see jumping around. So you see the footer the bottom part of the website. Let's go here. We see this part being loaded first before we see the entire collection. So if we refresh the page, and if we go even deeper, like the product detail page, for example, this is a good example of things jumping around. So the visual stability of this website will be not a 100%. So this will impact the score and eventually also the page speed. Let's refresh this page again to see what happens. You see things jumping around. You see things jumping down because content is put in between there. In this case, sizes or the color, for example. So that does give a few good examples of what happens in real life. So a score of 100 is the goal. How realistic is that with real content? As I just explained, the score is always a balance between functionality and speed. So it's also, does this feature that's impacting my clients for the better really worth the points I spend for the page speed? It could well be. There is a logical difference between the mobile and desktop scores you achieve, as mobile devices are quite limited in connection speed, but also in screen size, speed itself. So there will be a difference. And you pass the core web vitals test when you achieve a good result on 3 vitals. What we did, we are using the code base team mainly as our base to develop further websites. I will show you a demo. This takes like a minute of showing what we are testing with. So we use actual content, large images, Hoover effect, and anything that might be in a real website, because it's really easy to get a 100 page speed score if you just don't use any images, only text, no styling. What we want to do here is just give a good example of any functionalities we have, the filters we use on the collection page, images. If you hover over an image, you see a different image of the product itself. We have sizes, we have buy it now functionalities. We also have a blog section in the website. We have a cart section, of course. Also, a lot of images are being used here. So we are creating a realistic website with actual content, a lot of visual images. And this is the base that we are testing and using to define our own page speed scores. What this means in practice, that the balance between functionality and performance is something we always hold in mind. The lowest bare minimums we are using for mobile is an 80 page speed score and a desktop score of at least 90. What we are achieving right now with the current setup, and as you just saw it, is an average score for mobile of 86 and a desktop score of even 97, which means we are using most best practices, the newest functionality. So to conclude the entire webinar itself, the score is always a balance between functionality and speed, also perceived speed. We use the following minimums. It's also really a threshold to use for clients itself. For clients themselves, if they analyze their website, what is the score that I should be aiming for? Because we always want a 100 score to be achieved. What is realistically possible? These scores, in our experience, are really possible on your current website. Anything you are adding to the website could be an app, could be a plugin, it could be functionalities will often have negative impact on page speed, because anything you add means that you have to load more, things are better in place, things are requiring faster connections, data and stuff like that. So it will be impacting your page speed negatively, which is not a bad thing in essence, because the functionality may be worth the points taken from the score. That concludes this webinar for now. I think it's a short session, just explaining the core web vitals. What are they? What is the impact and what is realistically achievable? I hope most of this was really functional for you. And I can imagine you might have questions or answers or anything you might want to share with us as well. So in this case, I will
Thanks,
give a word
Leroy.
back to Sira. You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, like Leroy said, this is the time to ask your questions. I hope you have some. I see already two in the Q&A coming up, so let's start with those. The first one is, how do you think my conversion rate will improve while I'm optimizing for the core web vitals? Can we give an answer to that one?
I think that's one of the most asked questions we get. Basically, it's just a guessing game, because we do have a few things to just go on, but it's never a guarantee. So for example, if I even have it in my bookmarks, if you search for 1 second faster website conversion, this is one of the baselines we use. According to data shared, a 1 second delay in page load time will drop your conversion rate by 7%. And just to get a grasp of how impactful this is for your website, 7% for each second delay. And we have seen differences between website ranking between 1.5 seconds and taking 8 to 9 seconds to load the entire page. So the entire impact for that is it's massive.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Then a question about headless. We heard a lot about headless in terms of performance. Is this still needed, or can we perfectly do without using Shopify?
Yeah, headless it's quite a different game, because headless is a different approach to setting up a website. It gives you a lot of customizability, because we work with Shopify as the platform, giving you in essence a really sturdy base to build upon. And headless pulls everything away and gives you really custom options to set up your own website, work with APIs, get in your own content. The base fee is often higher because headless, the main maintenance of the project is you just need more time for that one, and time is money in most cases. What you see in the technical analysis of a headless website is that the score is lower, but the perceived speed is higher for the client, because it takes longer at the initial request to just load everything, the entire package. After that, the perceived speed for the entire client itself is higher. Only technical analysis from Google will end up in a lower score. But Google is also working on that one, so it's not necessarily a bad thing.
And I think with the Shopify 2.0 update, that quite some things changed, right? In the page speed we can reach with just Shopify.
Yeah.
So it's,
the score itself is already higher because Shopify has upgraded a lot of servers and around the world. And Shopify is also working on providing a kind of headless solution. They call it hydrogen and oxygen together. It's not available yet, but I think that's the best solution in case that you want to go headless, because going headless often means that you pull the entire hosting part to yourself as well, which is really impactful for your uptime strategy and things like that. But the hosted part from Shopify will be a good part in between. So right now you have like the headless solution and a native solution, and the part that Shopify is offering will be in between, which is something we really believe in as a good solution. Yeah.
Thanks. Cool. Yeah. So Mark, I think in terms of performance, if that's the only reason you would like to go headless, I think you can do without going headless also with the new Shopify 2.0. But there are other reasons to go headless. Then the next one, do front-end frameworks like React, Vue, Angular that do the bundling for you help in improving the core web vitals, or do they have a negative impact?
They do not have a negative impact in most cases. It really depends, because if you're, let's say you are building a configurator for a client and using React or Vue, for example, for that one, it could be really expensive. So it depends on how big the application you are building is, what the impact will be on the page speed itself. So in essence, it doesn't really impact the page speed score for you right away, but the bigger the application gets, the higher the impact will be on your page speed itself.
Okay, cool. Well, another question about headless setup, we just answered that one. So let's move on to the next one. What do you think of the option to delay the load of third-party applications like chat? For example, load these scripts 5 seconds after full load to limit the effect on web vitals, but still allow the extra functionality.
It's a good one. It could be a strategy because if you're loading a lot of plugins, for example, that could be the solution to do that. However, Google is also measuring the user experience as a user perceives the website. So adding in later plugins that are loaded later on will also be impacting your CLS score, which is the cumulative layout shift, which also is the visual stability of your website. So let's say the entire website is loaded and it takes like 3-4 seconds before anything else is loaded after that. They're still jumping around on the page, like you see added things. Could also be solved by just animating things in or making it look like part of the journey for the user itself. But it's really custom, so it depends on the project as well.
Okay, cool. Another one, how much development time on average does it take to go from a score of 60 on mobile to 80, and is it worth it?
Well, that's a good question, and it's really dependent on the parts that you get back from the analysis. If you just saw an example of the, well, let's take the example again. Let me see. In this case, you get a lot of examples on where to improve the entire page speed. This could be different for every page on your website. So the homepage could be quite different from a collection page for a product detail page. So it really depends on the points that you get back from the analysis. What is interesting in this case is if you do analysis of your own website, we can quite easily make an estimation on how much time it would take to get a severe impact on your website. Because the latter question, is it really worth it from 60 to 80? It depends on your website. Because if the entire website is loaded quicker, let's say it takes like 2 hours to just make a really simple optimization for off-screen images in this case. That does impact your website quite a bit, but the 2 hours might be really worth it to get it higher. It's also very custom per project.
Yeah. So if you really want to know, you can always mail Leroy@code.nl and we'll check it out for you.
Yeah.
Vicky, you were talking about quick wins, which I interpreted as being able to improve ourselves, but stopping at a jumpy page doesn't sound like something we can alter ourselves. Stopping a jumpy page doesn't sound like something we can alter ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the suggestions you get from Google or Google PageSpeed do include some technical work, so it's quite limited what you can do yourself. However, for example, on Shopify, you can easily install apps or plugins yourself, which also means that, well, while you're in the Shopify apps part and you are playing around with it, installing apps and just seeing what happens, and you see a live chat and you think, well, I like that one. You see a newsletter pop up, you see the other plugins, you enable all of those, then the entire impact on your page speed will be massive. And that's one part you can do yourself, but also resizing images, for example, because why should be a really big image being loaded for a mobile format? Might be, depending on the platform you're using, also something you can do yourself. But indeed, the impact you can do is quite limited as a user yourself.
Yeah, I do think with 2.0, you can also add and remove apps per page, right? That's also a new thing. So maybe that's something you can do yourselves now?
Yeah, because Shopify 2.0 made that change quite a bit better in our opinion. Because before, when you installed an app, there was also always some leftover if you removed it. That's now way cleaner. So it's getting better and better and more user-friendly to just install apps, try them yourself. And if you don't like it, just remove them again. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, final question by Bob. How much of your monthly revenue in percentage do you advise to put into development? What do you see in successful clients? Is it 10? Is it more, less?
It really depends on the type of shop you have currently. So what kind of clients do you have? What kind of products are you selling? But in this case, also feel free to reach out to us and just let's take a look together at your website and see what the best approach is for that one. Yeah.
Cool. We have a few minutes left, so if you have another question, just drop it right now. And otherwise, we will move on. Like Leroy also already mentioned, we worked this summer on our own code base theme. So if you're curious to learn more about the theme or get a live demo or see what it would mean for your site to move to that theme, you can go to this QR code or to code.nl/demo. And then Leroy or another colleague of Code is really happy to give you a live demo. Finally, on our website, you can find a blog about the Core Web Vitals. Most of the information we just mentioned is also in there. We will update it after this webinar. And I will send the recording to all of you. Yeah, so that's it. I don't think there are any questions left. So then then I would like to thank everybody, and especially Leroy for his talk, and you guys for spending your time with us during this webinar. I will send a survey to you all, so please let us know what you thought and what you would like to learn in a new webinar. And then I hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you all for your time.
Thanks.